So team, thank you for having me. This is ZABIAN, and I will be talking about cyber risk when it comes to autonomous vehicles. I'm the general manager for cybersecurity and analytics in Asia. I've been in cybersecurity for some time now, and looking forward to talking a little bit about what we're seeing in the industry. I'm very familiar with auto and vehicles and what is happening right now. So the three topics that we want to highlight today is the 4 disruptive trends we're currently seeing in the autonomous industry. Then we want to deep dive into connected car. And then I just want to talk about the automotive industry threats and risks. And then we'll open it up for questions, I think, at the end. So as you know, I've been working with the auto industry for over 20 years now. And as the auto industry has kind of grown, what I've seen is it's really evolved into becoming, connected, more autonomous, more shared, and of course, electric. And I'll just talk slowly about, so when you put it together in DXC, we like to call it as CASE, easy to remember. So what does connected mean? Connected means that I'm sure all of you have cars that are connected, which are basically, exchanging data, whether it's Wi-Fi or other pieces of information with the outer world and consistently feeding back information to your car. What is autonomous? Autonomous is a situation where, I don't know if any of you have had this pleasure, you sit in a car and it drives by itself, of course, with a driver, and it takes you to a certain place. We're currently working on this with most of the big car manufacturers. Then shared. I mean, all of us have used Google and Grab. So basically, this is a growing trend and we see it increasing. And then finally, electric. We believe that by 2030, 50% of the vehicles will be electric, the ones that are in the road. So as you see this huge transformation, this has a huge impact on both our industries, right? Both, the analytics space, the cyber space, the tech space, as well as the insurance space. And we'll discuss that later as we move forward. So let me touch a little bit on connected car. So basically, what connected car is a bi-directional function, right? So if you have Wi-Fi access or an entertainment system or a remote control, right? And all of you are saying, well, this has been around for a while. Why is this a risk now, right? So what's happening right now is there's more smarter chips being placed in cars, whatever vehicle it is, whether it's smart or normal vehicle. And what you can see right now is that, for example, it can track where you go, a vehicle. And based on that, some of your personal information can be leaked. Some cars are requiring you to put some personal information before you use certain tools. That also could be leaked and hacked. So this is something that you should consider. And then when that happens, then the car manufacturer should worry about brand reputation, right? So there's a lot of things that are impacted through this theft of an auto. So there's a lot of, now that we're becoming more technology savvy and people are becoming smarter in how they kind of can take over vehicles, this is something that, we have to be careful of. So our obligation as security professionals is to ensure that the whole life cycle of this vehicle is protected with continuous monitoring, upgrade patches, and looking at concerns that are happening from the clients. Now, if we had this conversation, I would say 5 years ago, it wouldn't be as relevant. But as we see it moving forward, this is huge and it's only going to grow. I'd like to end with autonomous vehicles and basically the automotive threats and risks that we see, or potential threats that we see. Number one is data breaches. So in the next 2 years, breaches have increased fivefold. People are interested in collecting your personal information or the personal information of your vehicle so that they can use it and leverage it for other things. And we can talk about examples when we open it up for questions. Intellectual property theft. So a lot of people are interested to kind of find out, well, how does the vehicle work, right? And see if there's some IP on there that they can leverage in their technology or leverage to do other stuff with it so that they can hack it and then be able to kind of hack your vehicle. Business disruptions. I think you are familiar with connected fleets, right? So once fleets become connected, what happens there is if somebody can hack in, they can stop a whole fleet from going one place or shipments from going around the world. That's a genuine concern. Connected vehicle theft. If the vehicle is now all connected, somebody can actually, steal your car without having to break in or do anything. So that's another worry and concern. The last thing, the two more things, taking over a car remotely. That is a big challenge. People can do it now. Not that I've done it, but I know people that can and have. And the final thing, as we talked about, is personal data that's currently in the vehicle. So with that, I'm gonna transfer back to the team and Paul. By the way, thank you very much for having me. It's a true pleasure being here and looking forward to talking more with you guys.
Thank you, El. Very, very great to have you on board. It took some convincing, and we can see that there's a lot of potential collaboration and discussions that we have with the SAS and Singapore Actuarial Society and with DXC. Sorry, El, using the PDF, right? Okay. So as many of us mentioned, let me just share my screen. Hang on. Okay, so again, good morning to all of you, and welcome to the autonomous vehicles and cyber session this time. Myself, I'm the actual moderator this time with Al, and also we have Brian Shen from Munich Re as well, who is an underwriter and actuary. So I would like to start off this session with a quick introduction of the current scene from my point of view. Please note that these following slides are actually based on the personal opinion of those who are presenting now. It does not represent any other opinion from our organizations, but it's room for further discussion. So autonomous vehicles in general actually are part of the smart mobility plan that we are all aware of. Within the whole smart nation drive, as you've read about, and in particular, we have heard about the Singapore Autonomous Vehicle Initiative, SAVI, and the Smart Mobility 2030 plan that has started in 2014. So what this aims to achieve is a more digitalized transport system where autonomous vehicles will be linked to connected vehicles and to all the various technologies from surrounding the car, inside the bus, inside the car, and sensing and everything. Okay, so insurance development is still in early stages, obviously, because there's a lot of issues faced, and mostly they're excluded from most of the common terms. And also the take-up rate is currently still in the research phase, so there's almost no it won't really pick up until commercialization has started. There are a lot of questions on insurability, risk profiles, and of course the nature of how claims and liability regimes worked out in the in a few contexts, ethical contexts, and also in how how assignment of at fault is to be done, which we will explain in a case study later. The impact of new technology will actually certainly drive the changes because it's completely going to disrupt the way motor vehicles are. On one hand, it's supposed to be more organized with less accidents, okay. But on the other hand, technology and with the changes in the way things work, systemic events could happen. Nevertheless, this is definitely a ripe area for innovation and disruption in terms of the way transportation is done, and also in terms of insurance solutions, like maybe parametric solutions. We can come to that later. So all in all, autonomous vehicles remains as an emerging risk, and it's a very good opportunity for actuaries and the insurance industry. So lastly, I would say that this is a very good introduction as we talk about cyber security, and we talk about the use of artificial intelligence and digitalization impacts, as well as we will mention, as we will soon cover in the broader themes facing us. All right, so we are going to have a sort of a panel discussion, calm presentation, okay, in the next few slides. So I can see that some questions are starting to come in. Please feel free to send your questions, and we can monitor and respond accordingly as we see. So Al and Brian we will, and myself will respond. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to just recap a little bit from the insurance point of view. As you can see here, what the risk profile changes and change to insurability will mean. So generally speaking, the rate of the way autonomous vehicles will affect a motor portfolio depends a lot on the level of automation, whether it's L0 or L1, low level automation, versus a L5, level 5 automation where it's fully automated. That means basically no drivers needed. So as of now, I think most schemes and most countries are in L1 or L2 testing, and there is some L5 testing, but it's in a very limited, very constrained environment. Okay, now an autonomous vehicle car, as you can see on the top right diagram, has a lot of technology, GPS, sensors, cameras, and Google and specialized maps, and even in the car, there's technology to communicate with other cars and with consumers and with the driver. So it's very complicated, and this diagram is a simplified illustration. Okay, obviously this definitely requires a manufacturing expert to explain this. So generally speaking, the risk profile and the way we do rating factors and pricing and reserving will definitely change. If you try to use the past data to analyze how autonomous vehicle portfolio will behave, definitely it's not really accurate. Okay, we have to think of a way to get more specialized data direct from the autonomous vehicles industry, and to look at how we can do this. So there are many schemes and ongoing initiatives around the world where we can get data and we can further do some deep dives. Off the top of my head, I have a link in the next slide that has a list of all the schemes globally. And there's for instance, corridor, a certain ITS corridor in Europe or in US where it's meant for autonomous vehicles to operate. I believe there's also a lot of strategic partnerships where Al can elaborate on, where maybe in a confidential way, that we are working with where big names like Toyota, BMW, or the usual cars, they are all developing their own version of autonomous vehicles technology. So over to you, Brian. Do you have any comments so far on pilot schemes and the rate of growth of these sectors?
Thanks, Paul.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So I think that in the public knowledge now that there are quite a few sort of level 3 cars going to be launched in the market by 2021, or with all the big names such as Honda, Hyundai, Kia, BMW, etc. And all these will be coming soon in the market. And in terms of like all the pilot schemes, I think there are quite a few of the robo taxis already in pilot in, for example, those in China, and they're going to be launched in Europe soon. And in US, Waymo by Google, they've been testing since 2017 in US. They just announced from October onwards, they open up the driverless ride-hailing services to the public. So that's already coming in quite a few places around the world with the pilot schemes that we are seeing.
Okay. One question to Al. In terms of the corporate side, do you have any comments on where do you see the growth of pilot schemes and initiatives worldwide and in Asia? Maybe I should move a little bit to the next slide here. There's Yep, there's more than 100 over smart mobility projects. So not all of them are cars, but some of them are industrial vehicles or you know, shuttles or what have you,
Correct.
or buses. Yep.
So the way we see it, and you know, the first trend was started off with vehicles, our vehicles, right? But the question is how quickly will the consumer adapt to that? And is the infrastructure strong enough? Where we see the fastest place that might take off is when you're looking at freights. So big trailers going from one place to another, right? That we can see a lot of that happening quickly because, you know, some of it is not safe, right? A lot of these freight drivers, you know, drive for more than 12 hours to kind of get things from one place to another. If we look at countries, I would say different countries have a different adaptability, right? We see, you know, the US kind of leading the way when it comes to, you know, connected vehicles. China's also up there in terms of connected vehicles. But, you know, where there are some, you know, I would say in Asia, some countries like Singapore now are trying to kind of leapfrog and go forward. This is something that will definitely impact the insurance industry. I mean, I saw a question come in terms of liability, you know, who's liable, what happens, and I'm happy to kind of talk about that. But all the big manufacturers that we're currently working with in DXC are working on some form of connected car, all of them, whether they're German or, you know, Japanese or European. They're all working on a connected vehicle and are forging ahead with that.
Okay, sounds like okay. So Al, when you say working on, let me ask a second question. When they work with you, DXC or the technology providers, right? Maybe it's a tricky question. Are they asking about insurance or risk transfer products,
So
or are they just still at the technology level discussion?
That's actually a very interesting question. So in some of the meetings that I've had with some of the vehicles, they actually are thinking about providing insurance themselves. Mm-hmm. And that is one thing that, you know, I've had a personal debate about with some of the executives, in which I thought it was a little bit strange that they would go down this path. But for them, the link they're looking at is, well, if I control the vehicle and then, you know, I then control it end to end, why would I give it to a third party? Why would I insure that? Right? Why would I let somebody else insure that? I'll just go into that business myself, right? And I can make that profit. I can talk about the debate I had with them where I didn't think it was probably the best idea, and especially for users, because I think there needs to be a separation between, you know, you and the vehicle, or the manufacturer. I think the challenge here is that as cars become more autonomous, just like you sign up for anything, right? You might just accept the terms and you don't really know what you're accepting before you start your car. And part of that could be liability or insurance or just like anything else.
Yes, that's a very valid point. People always want to, manufacturers and buyers of insurance want to know the terms, and they wouldn't want to have blindly sign some insurance, or maybe they need to fully understand exactly the arrangements they are having as they develop a driverless car or supply chain solution, and then where is the risk that they face, and then the last question is, what sort of insurance product or what sort of solution can the insurance industry provide them? So this is right. Am I correct on this point? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So then,
I think the biggest thing that we're going to face is who's liable, right?
Yes.
So,
yep.
You know, this is a driverless vehicle. So the question becomes is the manufacturer liable? Is the software manufacturer liable? Are you liable because you were negligent? So because you signed off and you just said, yeah, I'm okay with the liability on the vehicle. Yeah. So this is a very gray area right now.
Okay.
That people need to pay attention to. The other thing that I would talk about, Paul, is if you are in a car and you are driving and an autonomous vehicle hits you, who's liable in that situation, right? And what happens there? So these are some things that people need to think about that I think we haven't thought of through yet.
Okay, so here we have this illustration, sort of exactly leading on to what we've just mentioned. So we have a dilemma, and we don't know what the outcome will be. There's no right or wrong answer, right? Brian and Al. So option one is the vehicle, the passengers in the vehicle here, it will swerve to the left, okay, of the driver's point of view, and it will hit obstacle, and the driver and the passengers will die. But it will it will miss the pedestrians that are crossing the road, and they'll be okay. Okay. However, the passengers and the driver will be affected. Now the other option is to just go ahead and to kill and to knock the passengers, and of course save themselves and the driver and the passengers. So technology should. Now the first question is what sort of ethical issues should be addressed by the technology in the driverless car, number one, and also as you mentioned, who is at fault? Okay, if let's say either of these options happens, can we discuss, like, basically is totally new? Is it the software provider that's at fault? Is it the passengers for not looking at the red light, the pedestrian crossing, and is it the government for designing this traffic crossing in this way? Yep. So Brian, maybe you also have some comments on this situation.
Yeah, I think with the autonomous car now, a lot of people has question in mind that, who will be at fault. That, I mean, and this slide that I think we just take a quick look, who are the stakeholders, potentially all linked to these autonomous cars going forward. Like, I mean, obviously driver, we discussed that, and car manufacturers, I think it's quite obvious that on the, any production of the faulty motor parts, and also it could potentially fail to implement or design the car with warning signals, and that's more like a product liability. And the software provider and the AI programmer, if the software did not function as it was designed to be, and the repair workshop, who did not repair or replace the defective parts in the car for the sensor or radar or cameras, etc. For the digital map provider, it probably did not update the map with the road changes, with all the construction projects going on the road that could cause some accidents. For telecom firms, that obviously the connected cars, they always heavily rely on the communication, and there could be lapse in the signal and connectivity. In terms of government, of course, that if they fail to implement the road systems and all the infrastructures properly, that could become a liability. So, of course, the hacker, we talk about that a lot on the cyber purposes. So, in terms of liability, we will see that from the traditional kind of motor third-party liability, moving already to new spaces like product liability, could be a general liability, of course, cyber liability, and even technological errors and omission, the tech E&O space. So these will be all the new areas that you probably not seen in the past in the traditional motor insurance. And that's going to be quite a bit change for the insurance industry going forward.
So yes, so Al, you mentioned just now the question, right, that somebody has asked as well. Okay, maybe you want to comment. So this question, let me read it out, is how will third-party liability insurance be affected for L4 and L5 drivers, as drivers may no longer be able to have control over their cars? Yeah, so this is a very good question. And also, yeah, third-party liability is an insurance term, right? Third-party liability. So will there be any such a thing as third-party liability in the autonomous vehicle insurance concept regulation? Yeah, that's the thing.
So that's a very good question. I think there are different ways of solving this. The question is how is it going to be solved? So the way I look at it is, if I'm a manufacturer, and I'm not saying anything right or wrong, I'm going to want as little liability as possible, right? I don't want to be liable for the vehicle or what happens, right? You're buying it, right? I'll try to put some clauses in there to be smart and kind of, you know, limit my liability. And the question is, well, I'm a consumer of a product. So why should I be liable? I bought your vehicle, right? And I'm not driving it. So the question becomes I think here's where insurance needs to step in and really help sort that problem out, where they're taking care of both the consumer and the manufacturer and making sure that the liability is evenly distributed depending on what happens, right? So, you know, Brian was talking about various scenarios. The fear is if one takes over, right, then all the liability shifts to another party. But for example, I'm gonna give this example. If I tampered with the car as a user, right, why should the manufacturer be, you know, liable? I mean, in the future, you could probably just soup up your car by entering some code, right? I mean, people do it right now that are, you know, cars that are not street, let's say, secure 100%. So I think insurance plays a very important part in this to make sure that consumers are safe and that also manufacturers are safe. And this was my discussion with the manufacturers when I was saying it's in your best interest to not insure directly, right? To keep the insurance industry thriving on this, because that's what they do, right? And they can assess risk for both parties. This is my thought.
Yes, that's a good point. So Brian, do you have any also from the underwriting point of view, where can an insurance representative advise the manufacturers in this aspect, for instance?
I think one obvious area is around the cyber. Definitely,
Okay.
there's one huge threat in terms of, like, you know, how reliable your vehicle will be and how well the personal information can be protected, and all this. If anything goes wrong in that, and that definitely it will huge dam on the you know, rollout of this autonomous vehicle to the public.
Okay.
So just on Brian's point, I want to talk about personal information because this wasn't used previously. What we've seen in cyber, and this is more in terms of, you know, things like using, you know, Facebook or social media. A lot of criminals are now using the public knowledge that you say, hey, I'm going on vacation or doing this or doing that, right? To actually leverage that time to commit physical crimes, which is they're out of the house. So I'm gonna, you know, you're on vacation, so I'll go and I'll, you know, steal from their house. The same could be assumed if they can track you in your vehicle. If they see you've gone for a long trip and you haven't come back, or if they've seen you, for example, you know, they now know your routine that you leave the house at this time and come back at this time and you live by yourself, right? They can do the same to take the physical, let's say the IT world, instead of cyber attacking and leveraging that for the physical world. So I think it's a very big point when it comes to personal data. I know that for people, they might think it's a far stretch, but this has happened in a couple of countries right now and is taking place. Obviously not in Singapore, but in other places it has taken place.
Okay, so this is an interesting area we need to explore as well. Get cyber-related incidents and study the impact on autonomous vehicles and broader cyber risk incidents and all that. So we take it out with you, Al, that as well.
Sure.
Yeah. So you see, we have another question. I'll read it out. As we observe that no software provider is willing to guarantee that software is bug-free, okay, which is fair enough. How long do you expect it will take before manufacturers decide to insure the liability risks associated with autonomous vehicles? Yeah.
That's a very interesting question. So I think at some point, what will happen is just like providing hardware manufacturing, I think for them to insure it, they're going to have to start providing their own software. So if the firms are not going to insure the software, do back-to-back agreements, I think the auto manufacturers will start developing their own software that they would feel comfortable insuring, right? I don't see them taking on liability for a third party. I think that's really difficult for them to accept.
Okay. So so to Brian as well as pricing and underwriting actuaries, right? Basically, this means that the software, the way the software is being deployed and the complexity of the autonomous vehicles will have to have a consideration in the way we assess the rating factors and all those um, assessments. Correct? We need to have a more updated way of looking at it. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. 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 So very, very complicated. I think, yeah. So just to add, so generally speaking, this debate globally, where is still a very much gray area, right? Before we move on to the next area, so maybe just a quick comment, conclusion. Is there any particular country or regulations that's in Asia that is driving this discussion, or is it still left at the individual countries like Singapore, or every country has to cater the liability regime to their own transportation system and the insurance sector at that point in time? So
currently there's a gap.
Okay.
I think there's a framework that's being developed globally from a security perspective in which you kind of have to follow it. But if I would say, is there a country that is ahead in Asia that has implemented and thought this through? I haven't seen. I know that there are bits and pieces in Japan, there are bits and pieces in Singapore. I would say they are the four most advanced, in China, of course. I'd say those are the three countries that are foremost advanced when it comes to thinking about the bigger picture, insurance, how things come into play. But is there one form? No, I have not seen that to date.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I think, just to add on the regulation space, I think what we've seen so far in various countries, the regulation varies quite a bit, and also to the extent of acceptance of these autonomous vehicles on the road available to the public. I think a lot of markets are still on the pilot testing stage. So the government, the regulation, all this has still not been formally rolled out in many countries. So and insurance, I believe that will also heavily depend on the regulation locally, how the liability regime should be set up to protect the consumers and the users of these autonomous vehicles. So that has to be closely monitored, and to some extent that the insurance industry probably need to work together with the government or the regulators to make sure there's a proper coverage in place.
Very good. So long story short, we have to step up as actuaries. We have to connect with the LTA, Land Transport Authority. We have to, in Singapore, we have to also look at regional and global actual practices on autonomous vehicles. And we have to, on the actual side, we have to link up with the manufacturers, and we have to link up with DXZ as a solution provider. And we have to try to, as far as possible, look at how we can enable this shift into clarifying the liability regimes and the impact on tail risk and pricing risks for insurers, and of course support the setting up of risk transfer solutions, including the possibility of parametric solutions for all these manufacturers, and also the schemes, the government schemes that are supporting all these autonomous vehicles. Yep.
I mean, Paul, if I could just say something, and I know, we have 5 minutes and there might be more questions, but I think this is very important, right? The fact that you guys are thinking about this now puts you far ahead than anybody else, right?
Okay.
I think this is a great step, right? And I'm very glad that somebody's thinking about this and are getting proactive for something that's inevitably going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. As we mentioned, because this whole COVID has actually shaken up everyone quite a bit. There is now this also the theme of today is brave new normal. So nothing is going to be the same as in the past, and digitalization is going to catch us sooner or later, definitely. And as you can see in this slide, the many connected teams to autonomous vehicles by itself, we are looking at the whole digitalization question. And we have to get aligned as far as we can. Okay, so Al, definitely we take it up with you or to be ahead. Okay, cybersecurity, for instance, as you mentioned, cyber risk is definitely very closely linked to this autonomous vehicles risk, because many areas on the liability side and also on the way technology can be manipulated, right? Okay, so this is one thing that we have to address.
Absolutely.
Cyber risk as well. Of course, the use of artificial intelligence is fundamental to autonomous vehicles. So this includes anything that is structured and unstructured data out there, right? And the topic of big data is key. So I think that definitely bread and butter, artificial intelligence and how the processing of data is being used in the manufacturer side and also within cross industries will be very standardized in a 5G and even a 6G world, right? And which is what is needed for level 5 autonomous vehicles to be working. So without going through all these details here, okay, we are going to conclude soon. The many areas, the three main areas, technology, macroeconomic, and regulatory teams are actually crucial to understand the context of autonomous vehicles. I believe Al and Brian, if you have any comments, just jump in. Okay. We are looking at a groundbreaking, disruptive, highly disruptive situation now. As soon as we tie up all these areas relating to technology, that means if the technology works, 5G works, 6G works, data is available, telematics is possible, and secondly, if